Okay, today we are going to do 2 worksheets. Yeah, worksheets 3 and 4 because both of them are really super easy. So, bless you. Okay. All right, here we go. Adding and subtracting. Let's talk about that. Adding, subtracted, positive, negative numbers. So here's basically the rule. It's the same rule for adding and subtracting, okay? Because really, subtracting is the same thing as adding. All right, so here's what I say. And then I'll tell you what you probably heard other teachers say, which I like. I never used it before, but I'll say it. So subtracting, if I could speak, subtracting here's how I say it. It's adding the opposite. All right, I just kind of came up with that. All right, adding the opposite. So that's what subtraction is. So for instance, if I had 5 minus 2, all right, everybody knows what that is. It's not that hard, all right, especially since your positive number is first. It's just subtraction. No big deal, but what do we do here? Subtracting is the same thing as adding the opposite. So we don't really learn different rules for subtraction. We learn this one rule for subtraction. You turn it into an addition. That's the rule, okay? And here's how you would turn this into an addition. We add the opposite. So instead of minus, what do I turn it into? Addition, and I add the what? The opposite. What's the opposite of positive 2? It's negative 2. So what I did, I took a subtraction problem, turned it into an addition problem. And you're probably thinking, well, Mr. Hamrick, you made this way more complicated than what it was to begin with. I know what 5 minus 2 is. Yeah, I get it. But sometimes you're going to have this number out here being negative, or this number will be smaller than this number. All right, and that's where it really comes into play on changing it to a positive. So every time you have a subtraction problem, we turn it into an addition problem. Everybody with me on that? So now, with that said, let's talk about some of the rules for addition. So if I'm adding, okay, so addition. We have 2 circumstances. We have 2 situations. One when we have the same signs, and then one when we have what? Opposite signs or different signs, right? We'll say opposite signs. Okay, the same signs, that's super easy, okay? I'm not going to write out the rule, but I'll show you what it is. So if you're going to add things together, let's start off really easy. Let's go positive 3 and positive 2. You're adding, correct? And what are the signs of both of these numbers? They're both positive, okay? So here's the rule. You just add up the numbers and you keep the sign, okay? If you want to write that down as a rule to remind yourself, feel free to do that. Add the numbers and keep the sign, all right? So I add them up. What's 3 plus 2? It's 5, okay? What are the signs for both of those numbers? Positive. So what's my sign for my answer? It's going to be positive because you keep the sign. You keep the sign. You don't change the sign. Let me write it down, okay? So you add, then keep the sign. Or you can say and. It's probably better to say and right here. You add them up and keep the sign. That's the rule for addition. Okay? If you have the what? The same signs. Okay? If they're both the same signs, which means they're both positive or what? They're both negative. Thank you. If they're both positive, your answer is going to be positive. If you're adding 2 numbers that they're both negative, guess what your answer is going to be? It's going to be, no, you would keep the sign. If they're both negative. If they're both negative, you keep the sign. So your answer would be negative. For instance, if I had negative 3 plus negative 2, how do we add these? Well, what's the rule? The rule says you just add up the numbers. So what's 3 plus 2? It's 5. Okay, and then you keep the sign. What's the sign for both of those? They're negative, so what's my sign for my answer?
Negative.
It's negative. It's as easy as that. Everybody with me? Everybody's got it down when they're both positive. Everybody can do that, all right? But right here. Now, I can almost promise when we take the test on this, I'm not going to let you use a calculator. I mean, anybody can put that in a calculator. I'm trying to get you to understand the rules. I'm not going to give you anything real crazy. I'm not going to go negative 379 plus negative 541. I probably won't do that. It'll be more like simple stuff like this, okay? I'm not here to teach you how to add big numbers and carry the one and all that stuff, all right? Hopefully, you could be able to do that. But what I'm trying to teach you is the rule for the signs. It's super important, and you need to know how to do it without a calculator, because there's going to be times that you've seen already in this class where you're not just adding just regular numbers, okay? You're adding letters to each other. You can't put those letters into a calculator, okay? So you got to know the rules for addition, the rules for multiplication, the rules for subtraction, all that good stuff, okay? So again, what's the rule? You add the two numbers and you what? Keep the sign, okay? Because they're both the same signs, because this is the rule when you have the same signs. Everybody got it? Okay. Now, what if the signs were opposite? Again, this is all addition, okay? This is all addition. So let's use 3 and 2 again. So let's say this is negative 3 plus positive 2. Everybody see that? Are they same sign or different sign? Different signs. And you're doing what to them? You're adding. So here's the rule. The rule is you subtract the two numbers from each other. Okay? Instead of add, when you had the same signs, when you have different signs or opposite signs, you subtract the two numbers and you keep the sign. I can't just stop there. I can't just say keep the sign, because what sign do I keep? I don't know. I got a negative, I got a positive. Which one do I keep? Keep the sign of the larger number. Now, when I say larger number, I'm talking about, I'll just put that. I'm talking about the number without the negative in front of it, okay? So what's bigger, 3 or 2? 3, okay? So I subtract these two numbers from each other, and I keep the sign of the bigger number. Everybody got it? So let's just subtract these. 3 minus 2 is what? Is 1, okay? And then, how do I know what sign goes here? The larger number is 3. That one's negative, so what's this going to be? That's going to be negative. Right with me? Let's do another one. Let's go 3 plus negative 2. They're different signs, so what do I do with the two numbers? What do I do with the two numbers? I subtract them. 3 minus 2 is 1. Now, what sign am I going to use here? It's positive, because 3 is the bigger number, okay? It's positive, so my answer is going to be positive. You technically don't have to put the plus there, but I did just to show you. What do you think? Is it coming back to you? And I know some of you guys struggled with this when we did the regular algebra stuff. But you guys were getting away with it because you're just putting it in your calculator. All right, I get that. But again, you're not always going to be adding and subtracting numbers. Sometimes you'll be subtracting variables, and you just can't put that into a calculator. So you got to know these signs or these rules. Everybody good? All right. So now that's the teaching part. Let's do a couple examples. And I'm taking these right from the worksheet, okay? I'll give you the worksheet when I'm finished teaching this. So let's do, let's do this one. Let's do number 2. So it's negative 14. Now they put this in parentheses. They don't really have to, but they do. So I'll put it in parentheses. And that's a 7. So negative 14 plus negative 7. Okay, first of all, you're adding, correct? All right, so then we look to see what kind of numbers are we adding. Are we adding the same signs or are we adding different signs? Same signs, okay? So what's the rule? Look in your notes. What's the rule when you have the same signs? Add them up and you keep the sign. So I just add them up. Forget the sign right now. Just add them up. What's 14 plus 7? It's 21. And you keep the sign. So what is the sign for both of these? It's negative, so the answer to that is negative. It's as easy as that. Okay? Let's do another one. Let's do this one. This is number, I'm going to go out of order. That's okay. Number 6. Let's do that one. 5 plus negative 8. A lot of times in math, they don't like to put the plus and the minus like right next to each other. So they put that in parentheses. They kind of separate it. Okay? This does not mean they're being multiplied though, does it? All right? Because you got that plus sign in the middle. So this is an addition problem. So again, what is the I should say this. What are the signs? This is positive and this is negative. So what's the rule say when you have different signs? Subtract the two numbers, right? Subtract the two numbers and keep the sign of the bigger number. So if I subtract these from each other, 8 minus 5. What's 8 minus 5? It's 3. Now I got to figure out what my sign's going to be. Where do I look? I look to the bigger number, which is 8. What's that sign? It's negative, so that's going to be negative. You good with that? All right. Let's do another one. I think that's all the pluses I'm going to do. Let's do a subtraction. All right. Let's do number 3. What if I have 3 minus negative 8? What was the rule for subtraction? I add the opposite. Okay. Remember that? Okay. So I always change a if I could talk today, I change a subtraction problem into an addition problem.
Add a line, change the sign.
Okay, and you could say that as well. Okay, teachers have been teaching you that. Add a line, change the sign. What do I say personally? Add the opposite. I don't know. Add a line, change the sign sounds cooler because it's got a little rhyme to it, you know. But add the opposite is shorter. I think it's more me. I'm not like cutesy, rhymey kind of guy. I'm like to the point, you know, short and to the point. That's how I am. All right. So I know. Believe me, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. All right. So watch. So instead of subtracting, what do? We add the what? Opposite. What's the opposite of negative? It's positive. So now what did we just do? Now we have where it's addition and they're both positive. So what is this? It's just positive 11, right? Because you add them, keep the sign, and it's positive 11. Everybody see that? So there's really no different rules for subtraction. You just turn subtraction into addition, and then you go back and you use the regular addition rules. Okay? Let's do another one. This will be the last one of these we do. I don't want to do all your homework, do you? I want to leave something for you. I don't want to have all the fun here. Here we go. I'll give you a second to work on this one. You do it. It's a subtraction problem. So what do? Change it into a addition. Add a line, change sign, or add the opposite. Anybody get an answer for this without using a calculator? 50? 52? Anybody else? 20? So I got 52 and I got 20. Which one is it?
20.
All right. All right, so what are we going to do? We take that subtraction and you add the opposite, right? So I add the opposite of this. What's the opposite of this? Positive. See that? Add the opposite. Now, it's an addition problem, but one's negative and one's positive. They're different signs. They're opposite signs. So what's the rule when you have opposite signs? Subtract them. So we subtract them from each other. What's 36 minus 16? 20. And what's my sign going to be? Why?
Because 36, the higher number is positive.
That's right. The higher number is positive. So that's a positive 20. Okay? And that would be your answer right there. So it is 20. Everybody good? Okay. Let's move on to multiplication division. Because I don't think these get really any more difficult. Yeah, I mean the second page of that worksheet for this stuff, they just instead of just doing 2 numbers, they'll put 3 numbers, then 4 numbers, right? You have to add or subtract. But the rules are exactly the same. I tell you what, let's just do one of them just for fun. They actually put some fractions in here. Let's do a fraction. Oh, goodness gracious. Let's do number 30. Number 30 is a fraction. You guys are seniors, for goodness sakes. Fractions should not be a problem.
I hate fractions.
I know you do. So here we go. So first of all, what kind of problem is this? This is a multiplication problem because you got to Parentheses. Subtraction, because you got a sign in between these, okay? So it's subtraction.
Add the opposite.
So add the opposite. Very good. Add the opposite. Add a line, change sign. Whatever you want to say, okay? So now what are we doing? We're going 7/4 what? Plus 1/2.
So then you make a common denominator.
That's it.
Times by 2.
So what's your common denominator with 4 and 2? It's 4.
So it'll be 2 over 2.
Okay, so I didn't change this, did I? So I don't change that. What about this one? What did I do to 2 to get to 4? Multiplied it by 2, so what do we do to the top? Multiply that by 2. So it's plus 2. So what's your answer? 9/4. That's it. Okay, that's fractions. And to tell you the truth, they don't get any harder than that. There's only 4 fractions on this. I've done one of them for you. So there's only 3 that you have to do. And really, the denominators are no more difficult than what we just did right there. Okay, so we did addition and subtraction. What's next? Nope.
Division and multiplication.
Right, multiplication, division. So the nice thing about multiplication and division are the rules are exactly the same for multiplication and division. So multiplication and division have the same exact rule. Did I spell that right? D-I-V-I-S. No?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no I there. I don't know. That looks weird to me. All right, I think it's good. All right, so let's talk about the rules. So basically, we have a rule for when you have the same sign. And they're both true for division and multiplication. Doesn't matter if you're multiplying or dividing. Okay, it's the same exact rules. You have this. They have a rule for the same sign, and you have a rule for what? Opposite signs. Okay, and here's the rule: if they're the same sign, your answer is always, and it doesn't matter which one's the bigger one or anything like that. It makes no difference. It's always what? Positive. Boom. Yes. The answer is always positive when they're the same sign for multiplication and division. So take a wild guess. What's the answer when you have opposite signs? It's always what? Negative. All right? So let's just do a couple easy examples. We'll use the 3 and 2 again. So 3 times 2. Now notice, I have parentheses here, but this is multiplication. Why is this multiplication, not addition? Because there's no sign in between, right? If there's no sign in between, it means it's being multiplied. All right, so 3 times 2 is it positive or negative? Positive, because they're the same signs. What if I had -3 times -2? It's still a positive 6, isn't it? Because they're the same signs, same sign is always positive. So it's still a positive 6. Let's do another one. -3 times +2. What's the answer to that? That's -6. Does it matter which one's the bigger one?
No.
It does not make any difference. One's positive, one's negative. The answer will always be negative, and that's a -6 right there. Yeah, multiplication and division, normally we think of that as being a little more difficult, but really, to tell you the truth, in fractions, don't you think multiplication is easier than addition? Yeah. So when you first learn arithmetic, it seems like multiplication division was always a little harder. Would you agree? Than addition and subtraction. But when you come to this stuff right here with the signs and the negatives and positives, and even with fractions, I think multiplication division is even easier than positive and negative. All right. So here's division is the same exact rule. Okay, I did all multiplication here, but division is the exact same rule. All right, so it doesn't make any difference. So let's do a couple examples. I'll do number 3 on the worksheet. This is -20. Oops, I knew that was going to happen at some point. Let's try it again. -20 divided by -2. All right, it's division now, isn't it? It looks like a fraction, and it is a fraction, but this means division. All right, so you've got the same sign. So what's your answer always going to be when you have the same sign? It's always going to be positive. So 20 divided by 2 is 10, and it's a positive because they're the same sign. No biggie, right? Now, on the worksheet, like number 12, but most of the time in algebra, you don't see division like this. Put a negative right there. This is 12 divided by negative 3. Most of the time, you don't see it like that. You see that in regular arithmetic, right, when you're a kid. But normally, you don't see it. Usually in algebra, they usually make a fraction out of it to show division. But on this one, it's the same exact thing. So now, do I have the same sign or opposite signs? I got opposite signs. So my answer is going to be negative. And then you just do the division. 12 divided by 3 is 4, piece of cake. All right? Everybody good on that?
Yes.
Let me, I tell you what, it doesn't really get any more difficult than that, except for maybe a little bit down the bottom. So this is the next to last problem, number 35. Now, there's a lot of problems I'm giving you today, but they're all super quick and easy to do, all right? So it should probably take you less time to do all these problems than it will to do a regular college algebra book type problem. All right, here's another thing. Let's talk about this. This time I got 4 of them. 3 of them have the same sign. 1 of them has a different sign. So here's another rule for you if you want to think about this. If you have a whole bunch of numbers being multiplied together, and if you have, what should I say this? Let's take a look at how many negatives you have, okay? If you have an odd number of negatives, your answer is always going to be negative. So let's write that down. Odd number of negatives, your answer is always going to be what? Negative. If you have an even number of negatives, your answer is always going to be positive. So how many negatives do we have here? Just 1. So what's my answer going to be? It's going to be negative. And now you just multiply these together. Right, 3 times 3 is 9 times 3 is 27. You don't even have to worry about the 1. So it's negative 27. Everybody see that? So if you have a whole bunch of things, just count up how many negatives you have. If you have an even number of negatives, your answer is positive. If you have an odd number of negatives, your answer is negative. And that's all there is to it. What do you think? Yeah, that's good stuff, isn't it? All right.